Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller, inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe, and we'd like to say a very big thank you to you, the person who just showed up to listen to us, stuck us in your ears, and wondering what on earth the next hour entails. And to be honest, Mark and I haven't got a clue every month, but we are going to do our best to entertain you. But we also want to say thank you so much to all of our incredible patrons and academates at the Bestseller Academy who contribute towards making this podcast possible. And if you would like to be one of those amazing folks, you can get tons of incredible goodies. You just simply pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and find out about all the incredible deep dives you get, all the amazing benefits you get by being one of our experiments. And if you'd like to become an academate at the Bestseller Academy, it's simply academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. Mr. Stay, congratulations on your book launch, sir.
Thank you very much. I had a great time. Well, I've the actual launch is because launch day, publication day. Do you know what I did? I did sod all. I met a friend for lunch. Friend I haven't seen for about 20 years, actually. We had a nice old chat, chinwag, and I really didn't do anything. Because the thing I've learned is that this is a marathon, not a sprint. I'm actually selling more copies of The Crowfolk, which is the first book in this series, than ever before, than I ever did on launch day. Probably because it was lockdown, but also because, as we go on, particularly with the series, you just keep selling the series. You keep selling book after book after book. But we are having a launch. If you want to come along, folks, I think the day this goes live, it's the day after. So it's Tuesday, 26th of September, 2023, 6:30, Waterstones, Canterbury. We've got a launch. There will be books. There will be cakes. I've just had the cake toppers arrived. There will be chocolate. If you buy, or basically if you hand me a copy of The Holly King to sign, I'll give you a bar of chocolate in exchange while stocks last, one per customer. So yeah, it's branded chocolate. So that's all going to be fun. So see you there tomorrow. If you're listening to this in time, if you listen to us on the Wednesday, I'm sorry. This is why you should listen to us first thing on a Monday morning.
Or in North America, Sunday afternoon, Mr. Stay.
Sunday afternoon, yes,
yeah, it's
very good.
Like
although I doubt you're going to get to Canterbury in time. Yeah.
Well, you could. Like an 8-hour flight. You never know. That's brilliant. Well, good luck with that. And is it now, I know in the past you've done like crazy kind of Wembley Stadium technical live streams as well. Is this just an in-person, or is it going to be YouTube?
I might do the reading live stream, but I'm not sure yet. I've got to check ticket numbers and stuff like that, but we shall see. But brilliant. Mr. D, how's the non-fiction coming? Let's have an update on that.
Oh, I'm loving it, Mark. I'm really getting into it now. There's radar is fully open. We talk about this, like every author, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, like once you start getting into that concept of what you're writing about, world building, something we're going to be talking about later on this podcast, your radar starts to get open, and I'll go for a walk and something will pop into my head, and then I'll be, how many people have done this where you kind of like, you've gone just to go and have a bit of walk, and then you're sitting somewhere or typing on your phone, on your notes, or you're speaking into your phone. Oh, I've got to get that down. And that's me at the moment. I'm absolutely loving it. It's a load of fun. And I'm really looking forward actually to kind of sharing this journey with anyone else who wants to join me on the non-fiction journey. It's going to be great. We've got coaches lined up for the next, however long it takes. I'm aiming to write it in a year. And that's going to be, but I realize as well that with non-fiction, there's a lot of other stuff that authors really need to learn about around building. I think the idea of building an author brand is as important, if more important. What's your expertise? What's the thing that you're writing about? And then things like how you get on podcasts. I think that's relevant for every single author, but I thought we've got a bit of experience about that, haven't we? We've seen it. We've been on podcasts, but we've also done a lot. So like giving people a bit of training, bit of practice as well as what you do when you get an opportunity to be interviewed, whether it's by a magazine, a local newspaper, or a podcast. So we're going to be delving quite deep into that as part of an academy course that we're going to be running. So if you're interested in doing that, if you're interested in joining me, pop along to the academy. There's a box now. You can add yourself to the VIP list for nonfiction. And we'll be in touch and tell you more about that. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, you've got some other events happening, dates for the diary.
Yes. So, as part of the Maidstone Literary Festival on Saturday, 7th of October, I'm on a double bill with the brilliant Kelly Weeks. We did a deep dive with Kelly Weeks on marketing and social media and stuff, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that. She's amazing. She's absolutely brilliant. So I'm on first, Saturday, 7th of October, 10 to 11 a.m. So you'll have to get up early for this one. But I'm doing a thing called You've Written a Novel, What Next? And I go through the various options that you've got there. And then I'm almost immediately followed by Kelly at the same venue, the Kent History and Library Centre in Maidstone. She's doing Building a Marketing Plan for Your Book. So this is, if you've got a book and you're getting it out there, this is the double bill that you want, basically. This is the dream team. So I'll put a link in the show notes. You can check that out as well. And that promises to be, and the Maidstone Literary Festival is great fun, actually. It's on the same day I'm doing an event with Julie Wasmer and Lisa Cutts in the evening as well. So it's really good. It's going to be a good day.
It's interesting how it starts to build, isn't it? I mean, this is inspiring for authors listening to this, thinking, oh, I'd love to be able to do a presentation at a literary fair, but it's a little bit like you have to get one under the belt, and then when you're out there being seen, you start to get more offers, don't you? And it kind of starts to build that way.
Well, it's like I do panels. I moderate panels for at FantasyCon. I did a screenwriting panel with Queeve was there, Sarah Pimbrel was there, and a bunch of people, and it was really good fun. But I've sort of got a reputation for that now, so I do sort of get caught. But I also do pimp myself madly as well. If I see something, I'm like, can I come? Can I moderate a panel, please? And it's one way of getting free tickets to these things. So.
Totally. That's great. That's absolutely brilliant stuff. Brilliant.
Hey, we've got some news as well. We got some news.
Massive news.
Yeah, we're the Independent Podcast Awards. You're listening to the award-nominated podcast, the Bestseller Experiment at the Independent Podcast Awards.
Hey!
How about that, Mr. D?
That's I was very exciting. I remember you coming across them and thinking, no, we should pop ourselves down, and then the little email dropped in my inbox. I think just kind of after we recorded the last podcast with Susie, wasn't it? And we've been nominated. So I think there's an award ceremony happening in October.
End of October.
End of October. So we'll keep you. And I don't think it's one of these award ceremonies where you have to get all of your listeners to try to vote for you to win it. No. I think it's like independently judged, isn't it? Which I quite like. Yeah, well, the clue's in the name, because it's podcasts that aren't backed by a massive media organization, or anything like that. It's a couple of people and a microphone, which is what we are, So it's nice to see those smaller podcasts getting some recognition. Yeah. So as they'll always say, it's just nice to be nominated. It is. And we should also, on top of all that, Mark, we should celebrate with everyone listening, because everyone's made this possible.
Indeed.
Or we could maybe leave this to our 6th birthday coming up. Yeah.
7th.
So 7th, isn't it? I can't even remember how many years we've been doing this.
7, yeah.
Actually, there's something we're going to announce, but we'll announce it on our 7th birthday party. We're going to do a special in October to celebrate the anniversary of the Bestseller Experiment, and everyone's
been going so long we've lost count.
I know. 7 years. 7 year stretch. Or the 7-year itch. Which one will it be? Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, in the tradition of this podcast, if you're with us for the first time, we always have almost every single episode we have the most incredible guests that we have scoured the world and the deep. And this week, I tell you what, I've got to say this, folks, but we're knocking it out of the park. Honestly, these guests are amazing. So, Mark, tell us about this week's incredible guest.
Jessie Q. Sutanto is the award-winning best-selling author of Dial A for Aunties and Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers, and many, many books, as we'll hear. Now, we have a bit of a backlog of interviews, so we recorded this in the spring, just after the release of Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. Since then, Jessie has released another book in August called I'm Not Done With You Yet, which is kind of ironic title as well. And Jessie is just a delight, so full of energy. It's just a joy to speak to her. So we discuss how the Vera Wong books were inspired by her own aunties, the role of tea in story, and how lowering her standards unlocked the key to Jessie's success.
Fantastic. So let's listen to Mark chatting with the joyous Jessie Q. Sutanto.
Jessie Sutanto, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me here.
My absolute pleasure. And we're here. First of all, we're here to discuss your amazing new novel, Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murders, which is a fantastic title. Absolutely love it. Which talks about a 60-year-old tea shop owner turned amateur sleuth. Tell us about Vera Wong and where she came from.
So I after I wrote Dial A for Aunties, which is obviously about Asian aunties, I was like, you know what? Like, you can literally put like Asian aunties in anything, like Asian aunties and Bridgerton, and it's immediately like charming and delightful, and they're just so underused. So I was like, well, clearly I need to write another thing. And then this time I thought, well, I'll have the auntie be the main character. So that was first of all where the idea came from, and then I thought, well, I'll throw in a murder, of course, and I thought of like, well, where should I set it? And I thought, maybe a restaurant or like a bakery. But then I was like, well, everything is set in a bakery these days. So then I was like, how can I set the story apart? So then I thought, oh, a tea house. And then it just became this thing where, she finds a dead body in her tea house. And that was basically how the story came about.
Fantastic. Now, tell us about the role of tea in the story, because here in the UK, tea is kind of brown stuff. We put milk and sugar in it. It gets us through the day. It is important, but I think, tea, certainly in Chinese culture, has huge importance, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my grandfather, he was very traditional Chinese, grandparent. And so he was like, oh, you must know how to properly brew tea and then properly like serve it to your future husband. That sounds so horrible to say, but then so he taught me how to do it, very, very properly, where you have to like scald the teacups first, so they're hot, and you throw out like the first brew because it's like harsh or whatever, and then you only drink the second brew, all that stuff. And I actually enjoyed doing it. I've never served tea to my husband. I think he would freak out if I did. And then he'd probably be like, is it poisoned? Like, oh, and he's English, but he doesn't like tea. So I don't know. I want my money back. I thought I was getting with a tea lover, but no. So it was really nice being able to write a book where tea plays such a strong part, because that was what I grew up with.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And there's some really, really exciting news about the book as well, involving someone. Let me check my notes. Oprah Winfrey? Tell us about that.
Oh my God, it was so crazy. So my film agents submitted, Vera Wong to like producers. And then I believe we already had we were on auction already with like several, studios. And then all of a sudden she emailed and she was like, oh, Oprah and Mindy Kaling have been looking to do a project together and they really like this one. And that came in at like 6 a.m. my time. I was preparing lunch boxes for my kids. And I was like, oh my God. And I can tell you that those lunch boxes sucked. My kids came home and they were like, Mama, I need to talk to you about what was in my lunchbox. And I was like, I don't know what was in your lunchbox, because honestly, I don't give a crap that day. Sorry.
You were distracted. That's totally fair. I think that's totally fair. Well, look, let's talk about the journey from the bad lunchboxes and Oprah and Mindy Kaling to where it all kind of started for. Because as I understand it, you studied in Oxford in the UK, and you studied English, and essentially you sort of came out wanting to be an author straight away, but it didn't quite work out like that. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so I did my undergrad in Berkeley, California, and after I graduated, I was like, "Oh no, I'm still mediocre at most things. So maybe I'll apply to grad school so I can avoid real life for a bit longer." So then I somehow got into the Oxford program, which was truly a miracle because all the other universities rejected me, including my safety ones. So then I went and I did the creative writing master's program at Oxford. And after that, I was like, all right, I have a master's degree from Oxford. I am hot shit. Like every publisher is going to be like begging me for a manuscript. And that didn't actually happen. It took me like, I think 9 or 10 years before I actually got a publishing deal. And in between, during those years, I was continuously writing. But I also had day jobs. So I was working as a wedding photographer in Oxford, which was really great actually, and is also the reason why so many of my characters are photographers. And then I moved to Indonesia with my husband, and Indonesian weddings are really huge. They're like, on average, they have like 2,000 guests. So I would have, I know I see your look of horror. That was my husband's look of horror too. Because we actually had an Indonesian wedding. And ours only had like 1,500 guests because he couldn't muster up 1,000 guests on his end, which was humiliating, by the way. So, I would have to like join a company or something if I wanted to continue photography. So I quit. Instead, I worked from my family company, which was in real estate. And I learned a lot as well that contributed, I feel, to writing, like a lot of things about real estate and marketing and, just a lot of the different disputes that like you could never have foreseen, a lot of stuff like that. And I was still writing. So I had written 8 books before I got my first book deal. And
Wow.
the first book deal was actually for my 5th book. That was how long it took, like the back and forth and all that stuff. I had finished my 8th by then. So yeah, it took a really long time.
There's a lot to unpack there. Because I think as a wedding photographer and working in real estate, you're dealing with 2 of the biggest decisions that people make in their lives, getting married and buying a home. So you're seeing people kind of at their best and at their worst. And as a writer, this must have been amazing. You must have been filing stuff away all the time, thinking, I'm going to put that in a book. I mean, was that the case?
Yeah, totally. I didn't realize how much I was going to learn about people going into these positions, and yeah, I learned so much, and also like I saw a lot of very ridiculous situations, right? Especially at weddings, because like it's such a stressful occasion. You've shelled out so much money, you want everything to go well. So I am seeing people at their most stressed out, which was amazing.
Well, let's talk about those 8 books, because the last couple of years for you have been astonishing. I mean, what an incredible... You've got Dial A for Aunties, which came out in 2021, which won the Comedy Women in Print Award, and we love that award. We've supported that in the past. Then you've got The Obsession, which was a YA revenge thriller. 4 Aunties and a Wedding, sequel to Dial A for Aunties. The New Girl, a YA thriller. Well, that was unexpected, a YA rom-com. Theo Tan and the Fox Spirit, which is a middle grade fantasy. And then we have Vera Wong in 2023. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And 2 more books coming this year. You're very prolific. That is an incredible... I mean, were these all waiting, just ready to go? Or are you just a very fast writer?
So I did learn to be a very fast writer during those like 10 years because so my first book actually took me 3 years to write because I was still kind of
Mhm.
learning. And I had this notion that like art has to take a lot of time. Um, and then for my second book, my friend convinced me to do NaNoWriMo. Um, yeah, and so I wrote it in a month, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" It's a mess, but wow, that was an amazing experience. So then, from then on, um, I always tried to like write quickly, like write with using like 15-minute timers. And that was, yeah, that was really helpful too. Like, so I would set the timer for 15 minutes. And for those 15 minutes, I could only write. I couldn't like delete. I couldn't even take a sip of water. Just, pure writing for 15 minutes. Then
Wow.
after that, I can take a break and whatever. But it was, the number one thing it did was that it allowed me to lower my standards because if you can't go back and edit, then you're forced to just keep marching on.
Yeah.
And I got really good at doing that. And then the other thing I got really good at doing was because I was getting so many rejections, and it was really bad on my mental health for whatever reason.
Mm.
So I was like, you know what? I need to emotionally move on as soon as I send out a manuscript. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I'm no longer excited about you. I'm going to move on to a new shiny project. And that really, saved my sanity, I guess. So
Yeah.
I learned to do that. And so now I'm still doing that. Like the moment I send off something to my agent, I'm like, okay, I'm taking a break and then I'm moving on to the new thing. So
Yeah.
so I don't really like dwell on projects that I've already sent off. That's why I'm like, I'm always I'm moving on so quickly.
So that 15-minute habit, is that something that you're still doing, or are you giving yourself more time now?
No, I'm still doing the 15 minutes because
Wow.
otherwise I procrastinate a lot. I end up like on Twitter for
Yeah.
like an hour or two. But I find that if I set that timer, then I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. And then now I can write about 500 words in those 15 minutes. So I just need to do like 4 15-minute rounds a day, and then I'm done. Right?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That is really amazing. I want to talk about Dial A for Aunties, because this was, I know it wasn't the first book that you wrote, but it was very much your breakthrough book. And what I read, and we have something in common because we're both Terry Pratchett readers. We're both fans of Terry Pratchett. And as I understand it, Terry's witches inspired the Aunties in a way. Tell us about the Aunties and where they came from and where they're going as well, because I believe there's more on the way. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, the third book should be out next year. Unless my editor hates it. I don't know. I hope she doesn't. So we'll see. We'll see. She's still reading it. So they basically came from my own aunts and uncles. Because I grew up with, in a very huge, very tight-knit family. And I went to school in Singapore. My family is in Indonesia. And somehow, like when I was 14, I was dating a boy, and I thought I was being, very cunning about it because I was in a foreign country. And then like that same day, my parents called and they were like, "Oh my God, do you have a boyfriend?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And they were like, "Well, like aunties, like cousins, sister, like sister's husband or whatever saw you." And they just like there's always like I don't know, it's like 5 times removed or something. It's what I grew up with, and they're just always so nosy. They're in everybody's business, and so I kind of feel like it's payback, like, and it's time for me to They owe this, they owe me after like over 30 years of this.
But what's interesting about the Aunties is it feels very specific to your experience. But as I understand it, you're getting messages from readers all over the world saying, that is just like my auntie. And we find very, very often the things that as writers we think are specific and might not make sense to other people actually turn out to be universal. And that's been the case here, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just been so wonderful. I don't know how, I mean, my God, like the moment I received a DM from someone who was like, I'm from Nigeria, and this is exactly like my Nigerian aunties. I was like, oh my God, this is the best moment ever. And apparently they're also very much like Jewish aunties and Greek aunties.
Yeah, I can introduce you to some Catholic aunts as well. So
Yeah.
What's also fascinating is you don't really refer to the aunties by name. They're like big auntie, second auntie, fourth auntie. Was that again? Is that a conscious decision to do that? What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, it's actually part of the Chinese culture, because like the family hierarchy is very much like age dependent. So like we actually call like our big aunt, like big aunt, well, in Chinese, but it translates to big aunt, and then big uncle, stuff like that. So it's very interesting because I have seen a couple of reviews that were like, oh, she dumbed it down for readers, and like I promise you, I didn't. It is actually part of the like family hierarchy.
I'd love to talk about Theo Tan and the Fox Spirit, because as I understand it, that was written before Dial A for Aunties, but
yeah,
it's middle grade fantasy, very, very different to the Aunties books and from Vera Wong. What were the big challenges of writing a middle grade fantasy?
So Theo Tan was actually my 7th book. So Dial A for Aunties was my 9th book. So I didn't actually write an adult book, until like Dial A for Aunties. Up until then, I was writing young adult. And then my then agent, he was like, oh, hey, there's this new imprint that just opened up and they're looking for middle grade fantasy books. Do you want to try your hand at writing middle grade? So I was like, okay. So I wrote that, and I thought it was so fun. It was like a lot less angst than YA. And a lot less romance, obviously. And then it was a lot more jokes, a lot more like just so much more humor. And I think that actually helped me, get on the journey to like end up writing Dial A for Aunties, because up until then I was only writing young adult suspense, because I was like in my dark and deep era. So I didn't actually try humor until Theo Tan, and that was what made me realize, like, oh, I actually like writing humorous books.
Yeah, because the Aunties books, they're very, very funny, very funny. And as I believe it, the original file name for them was Meddlesome Aunties, so it was the intent was also to make it funny. So was that a question? Did you feel like you unlocked something when you tapped into the humor? Was that did the writing come more freely?
Yeah. So with Dial A for Aunties, what I realized was I was looking forward to writing a lot of the scenes, like when the main character comes home with a dead body, and then her, she has like the conversation with her mom. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to write this scene, and I didn't feel that before, not as frequently rather, but, I would say like that happened for so many of the scenes, I was like, oh my God. And then now the aunties are going to come. So I was having so much fun writing it.
And you mentioned the YA books there as well, which, we've got The Obsession and The New Girl. And you said they're kind of, intense and angsty. Is that something you're leaving behind, or will you come back to that at some point?
I really hope I can come back because so the Obsession was a very small book deal, and I'm sure your listeners know this because they're writers. But the amount of marketing that your book gets is directly correlated with how big of an advance you get. The Obsession got a really small advance, so I thought, okay, this book is just going to sink into obscurity. No one's going to know about it. And but it went viral on TikTok, and so it's actually selling incredibly well. And so I've been receiving a lot of fan mail asking for another book in that like series. But I don't know how, because like I killed off like one of the main characters. So so then I'm like, I don't know, but I really, really want to, because the fan base, they're so passionate, and they're like, most of them are teenagers, and it's just wonderful, So I really hope to dip back into it, but I just haven't had any ideas for it.
This thing of going viral on TikTok, it's something that's kind of completely out of our control, isn't it?
Oh my God, yeah.
But amazing when it happens. Is there sort of an added pressure to deliver when you've got all these readers kind of saying, give us more?
No, I wouldn't say like, I don't feel pressured because I'm used to pressure, because I'm Asian. So I'm driven by Asian guilt. So I don't feel the pressure. I know other authors do, though.
Brilliant answer. I also want to talk about the things that inspired you early on, because I read somewhere one of the things that got you into writing was binge watching The Last Airbender and playing World of Warcraft, which again,
oh my God, that's from like so long ago.
I know, but you've been writing fantasy, and you've been dipping into that fantasy world. Are those influences still part of you? Will we ever see? Because you said you can put Asian aunties in anywhere. Will we ever see Asian aunties in a World of Warcraft style fantasy novel?
Oh my God, I would love that. So I am actually going back to my roots of fantasy.
Brilliant.
I'm writing an adult fantasy right now. And it is terrifying because it's so difficult to write sci-fi fantasy, I think. Because there's so much world building. You're creating a whole new world, and then everything just has to be a certain way. But I'm finding it really challenging, which is probably a good sign, because you should always be challenged by, the books that you're writing. So yeah, I don't know if it'll work out or if it's going to end up really bad. But we'll see. But I write so fast anyway. Like my husband was like, oh, okay, if it ends up being really bad, oh, big deal. You've like wasted 2 months, which doesn't sound very sympathetic, but it's a good point.
I'm of the belief that no writing is wasted. Even if a book gets trunked, you've learned something through it, and you keep moving on. Absolutely. I want to dial back again, because you've got this incredible success. You've got award-winning books. You've got, you've got Netflix series coming. You've got Warner Brothers TV series coming. All this great stuff happening. But I want to go back, because I read somewhere that when you were being interviewed for Oxford, and they asked what you were going to do with your degree, what can you remember what your answer was? Because I think it's a fantastic answer.
They were like, oh, what are you hoping to get out of the program? And I was like, well, it's an Oxford degree, so I expect to be such a world famous author that when I sweat, I drip diamonds. Oh my God. And it was clearly a joke, but there was like 2 seconds of silence. And then the course director who was doing the interview, she said in this very proper Oxford English, accent, she was like, all right, And I was like, oh no, that's it. I've blown it. And this was the only interview I got. Like all of the other schools rejected me. And I hated myself so much, like, you know, for the following days after that. I was like, why did I say that?
Well, the thing is, we love setting goals. We love ambitious goals. Sweating diamonds is a new one, but clearly you're doing something right, Jessie. Now, this has been absolutely fantastic talking to you. You've mentioned the fantasy, you've mentioned more Aunties, you've mentioned more Vera Wong. Coming in 2023 as well, you've got I'm Not Done With You Yet. What can you tell us more about that, or is that still top secret?
Oh no, it's so that's coming out sometime in August, and that is an adult suspense. I'm very excited because it's my first adult suspense, and adult suspense is actually my favorite genre to read. That's like my bread and butter. But I just never dared to like venture into it until my friend, who's another author, she kind of nudged me into doing it, and I'm so glad I did. You know, because part of what's so great about adult suspense is that there's a lot of like very bitter marriages, and so I was able to like take, you know, the most petty arguments I've had with my husband and like put them in the book. And it feels so cathartic. Like it literally like, I did actually start writing it because we had an argument, and then I just wrote like a mini scene, you know, about the argument. And then I built the whole book around it because that's how petty I am, you know?
It's brilliant.
Anyway, I'm very excited.
That sounds amazing. And also coming 2023, 3 and the Iron Fans. That's a sequel coming as well. Can you tell us more about that?
I think it's coming out this month. I should know the pub date, but I forgot. Because, you know, I have 4 books coming out this year, so I'm very important.
You really are. No, you really are. This is fantastic. I love it. I'm loving that energy. Jessie, it's been an absolute joy speaking to you. I'd love to speak to you again, maybe in a year's time when you've published another 7 or 8 books. I just, you know, it is fantastic. And best of luck with the fantasy. I can't wait to read that and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. Thank you for having me.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Oh, Mark, I tell you what, if there is a model interviewee, Jessie is it. I mean, any writer listening to that interview and wondering how you engage an audience, I mean, she is just, but she's so, what I love about Jessie is she is so full of incredible energy, and you just know what you're going to get. Listening to her voice and listening to how she speaks, you know what you're going to get in her books, because all of that and more is going to be packaged up into this incredible story.
I saw this I was at FantasyCon last week, and you go to all these different panels, and Queeve McDonald, our friend of the podcast, Queeve McDonald, whatever panel he was on, he just brought it to life. And the other panelists were all perfectly good, but you look at someone like Queeve and someone like Jessie, who are just full of energy, and you immediately go, well, I want to read their books. If they're anything like their books, I want to read them. Now, I know most authors are kind of, you know, we're often quite insecure. We often like to be alone. We often don't like to be on a stage. But I think if you can just, you know, create a persona for yourself that is just you on stage, you on a podcast, you in front of a crowd or whatever, and then the real you. I mean, this is kind of what I'm like, because the real me just
you're actually quite shy. You're quite shy and retiring type, aren't you, Mark?
I am. I know you're saying that with a wry smile on your face, but actually, I do have this kind of social battery that gets drained really, really quickly. And I remember a couple of Christmases ago, I was invited to some publicists, because I deal with publicists a lot doing the podcast. I was invited to their Christmas do, and I didn't know anyone in the room, and I lasted about half an hour. And I was like, I can't do this. And I left. But if I'm on a stage, if I'm on a podcast, if I'm doing a reading, I'm totally fine with that, because that's the book me, that's the publicity me. And I will go out there and give it the old razzmatazz while I'm up there. And then, I had this at FantasyCon about sort of halfway through the Saturday. I was like, I've had enough. I need to get out. Luckily, it's in the middle of Birmingham. So I went for a walk. Birmingham City Centre the library there is astonishing. The Birmingham Library is just fantastic. It's a joy. And they've got all my books there. So bonus points for that. So I was just like, I need to get out. I need to, So I think people look at people like me, or maybe people like Queeve, or people like Jesse, and just think, oh gosh, they're just naturals. But it's all an act. Certainly from my point of view, it's all an act, folks.
Yeah. Well, no, it's true though. I think you're right. I think, we were talking earlier about, the importance of doing podcasts, getting yourself out there as an author. And a lot of people struggle with that because they think, I don't like to market myself. But we've talked about this before. You're not marketing yourself. You are marketing your book. And everything, if you think about Jessie's interview, everything that she was talking about was the joy and excitement she has around writing her book. And it's about the book. And, honestly, we have to be enthusiastic about our books, because if we aren't as the authors, who's going to be interested in buying them? Yeah. So absolutely brilliant. She totally knocked it out of the park. Let's talk about this amazing habit that she developed. It's almost like she's been listening to the podcast for a few years, but 15-minute habit. Yeah. Setting a timer, which we've always recommended to people, set that timer. But she's knocking out 500 words now in 15 minutes, which is absolutely
she called it pure writing. She doesn't even take a sip of water, and she still does it now. And she does 4 rounds a day. I just think it's brilliant. But I love the quote. She said, "I needed to lower my standards," which is just terrific, because she realizes that it doesn't have to be perfect first time. You need to get it down, then you can refine it later on. And her whole attitude is just so positive. Get it down, get it out there. I just salute her. It's terrific stuff. It's terrific stuff.
We've talked about a 200-word challenge for a number of years now. And I worked out 15 minutes. Jessie's writing 500 words. That means she could knock out 200 words in 6 minutes. So, folks, eventually, this is the important bit, you might not be able to write 200 words in 6 minutes, but eventually you probably will if you practice. She's practicing 500 words 4 times a day, basically. And, she wouldn't have started off like that. I'm sure when she started off, she wasn't knocking out 2,000 words in an hour, which is what she does now. Think about that, Mark. In 10 hours, so if she wrote for an hour a day, which she says she does, in 10 hours, she will have 20,000 words. In 40 hours, she will have 80,000 words. In 40 hours, that's a working week for most people full time. In 40 hours, she will have written a book. And it's absolutely no surprise that she's prolific. I must say, listening to the interview, it totally brought me back to all of our discussions with Shannon Mayer. Right. Episode 4, maybe 3 or 4, very early on. Show notes. Yeah, very early on. Now, Shannon's obviously, we've championed Shannon for years, but she's an independent author. Jessie is traditional. And I just love their attitude. I love the fact that they don't see this idea of writing a book as something that they're going to be spending the next 5 years of their life, and self-flagellation and, I'm an author. Well, it's like, get it done.
That's the thing. She said she was initially held back by the notion that art needs to take a lot of time. And I think that it can be crippling, because you think, oh gosh, someone took so many years to write their first novel or whatever. And we can put authors on a pedestal and think, oh gosh, these people are artists, and yes, they clearly blood, sweat and tears. But no, once she got over that, boom, she was off, and now she writes a book in 2 months. And these are good books. Make no mistake. You look at the reviews. She's a terrific writer.
Definitely. So it makes me ponder on the question, what if we could drop this notion that writing a book had to be hard. Because, you know, we know what it's like. You stick a backpack on and you start walking up a mountain. If you put the backpack on and you're like, oh, this is going to be hard work. Well, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. It's going to be harder than it would have been if you think, right, I'm going to be able to do this. And it's so, I don't know what percentage of it is mindset and what percentage of it is reality, but I know that mindset plays a major part in it.
It is. I mean, the thing is, it is hard work. It's not working down the silver mine. It is hard work, but it's fun hard work. I think there is that distinction. You know, my wife's a gardener. She works 8 hours a day digging and all sorts of stuff. Really physical work, but she loves it. It brings her joy. So if you don't mind working hard and enjoy, we've said this before, enjoy the process. Enjoy the process. Enjoy getting stuck. Enjoy getting blocked. Enjoy trying to figure out how that scene works. You know, but if you can figure out a way to do that, which I do. You know, I came down this morning. I write every day. There was a scene. I only had a vague notion of what the scene was going to be in my head, and I start handwriting with my little Parker pen, Parker Jotter, best pen ever made. I do start by going, okay, what happens in the scene? What's happening in this? And it just gets the pen rolling, gets the pen moving, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I'm lucky because I get to do this full time. So I'm writing 2 hours every morning, did 2,500 words this morning. You know, boom, off we go. Not every morning's like that. Some are harder than others, but, you know, you show up and enjoy the hard work. That's you know, because otherwise you end up, you know, just self-flagellating and
or losing
making
the
it harder
passion.
than it needs to be,
or losing the passion. We've got to be so careful when we talk with other people about our books. If we end up finding that 95% of the time we're talking about how challenging and difficult it is, you know, we're becoming that character. We're becoming that character author. And I don't think that helps us long term. Whereas you look at I'd say the thing about Jessie, she had this lightness to her. Yeah. It was this lightness. There wasn't a heaviness like you kind of often feel. It's a lightness. She was like,
yes. And she did say, she said, you should always be challenged by the books you're writing. She's writing fantasy next. You know, she wants a challenge. She wants something new and difficult because that's what brings her joy, I think. But it doesn't mean the challenge has to be miserable. The challenge is what invigorates you. It's what keeps you going. It's what, you know, gives you that spark. So that's what I keep going back for.
Now, it wasn't always easy for Jessie because she was talking about the multiple rejections she had and her mental health. And she was talking about she got a master's degree, didn't she? And it was how many years after her master's that she...
I think it was 9 to 10 years after her degree that she got a deal. That's
not a ticket to a book deal, is it? Getting your
no,
master's.
I think, you know, you will learn stuff. Exactly. You will learn stuff in your master's degree that will almost inevitably make you a better writer. But it's not like publishers are going, where's your degree? Because publishers understand that anyone can be a writer. You know, anyone, whatever your background is, it's, you know, it's the same with screenwriting degrees as well. You know, movie makers don't care. They just care, is what you've written, is it good? Is it any good? That's all I love. About.
And when you think about that, I love that because how many industries are there, professions in the world where there isn't a prerequisite that you have to have spent this money doing this particular degree or this master's or this PhD in order to get that job? It's like, it's an inclusive, anyone can do it. And it is, it's always down to the strength of the story ultimately. And that doesn't matter if you've done a master's or not. If you're a great writer, you know, paperwork won't give you the extra edge. But she did say that the rejections, you know, took a toll on her mental health. And I think we should talk about this because we the way we do it in the academy and with our BXP team is we celebrate rejections. We say, if you've got a rejection, it means you're out there, you're really trying hard.
Skin in the game.
In the game. You've got one less company that you have to worry about because they've declared their cards and said they're not interested. Great, move on. You know, taxi. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's so important to have that kind of attitude towards rejections, as hard as they are to get, especially if it's with I think the hardest ones are if you've got your heart set on getting a certain agent, a certain editor, a certain publisher, a certain book cover designer, and you get rejected by them. That can be hard because part of your dream has been built around this kind of vision of, I want to be with HarperCollins or I want to be with, you know, Simon and Schuster or whoever it is. But I do think it's important that this managing your mental health around rejections is something that authors have a strategy, a plan, an attitude towards, so that they don't let the rejections destroy them, which I'm sure has happened to many, many authors in the past, hasn't it?
It has. And the thing you have to learn is the rejection never goes away. It never stops. I'm still getting rejected for things, and I'm 7-8 books into a career, a couple of pretty much every screenplay I write gets rejected. I mean, you think publishing is bad? Try screen. This is,
maybe everyone should be a screenwriter first. That's what you did, right? Maybe that's the secret.
It is. This is the screenwriting panel. We were just like, authors. We hear authors moaning about publishing. We're like, oh, you want to try screenwriting, mate? It's a doddle after that. It's just part of the process. And the joy with publishing and self-publishing is you can bypass that. You can make the book that you want it to be. You can get it out. I appreciate people, like you say, want to be published by Gollancz or Mills and Boon or whatever. Of course. But what's important is getting the words out and getting people reading it.
Yeah, and again, like what profession can you spend a ton of time focusing on? And if your goal is to get traditionally published and that doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. It was 50 years ago, but this is we should be so encouraged by this. We should be so excited by this idea that, okay, so traditional publishing isn't for this book potentially. So what do? Well, I self-publish and your work gets out there. You're guaranteed when you start writing your book, if you're serious about writing it and finishing it, you're guaranteed to get it out into the world now. That is incredible. And still in today's like amazing world that we live in with like technology and all the amazing opportunities we have, there are still many, 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 many industries where the old school still applies, and that you can go for something like, I know you could train to be a doctor, but you can't be a self-published doctor. You can't just set your own, there are rules.
Which is
probably a good thing. Yeah. Not self-published doctor, but it'd be like self-operating surgeon. You can just pop over to their house. Yeah, they wouldn't take me to the hospital, but like I've got a cellar downstairs. We'll get that appendix out. I mean, there's certain things.
That's like a Python sketch, isn't it?
It is.
Come with your liver.
Do you know what's awful though? I was watching this Danish thriller yesterday. Oh, it made my stomach turn, Mark. I can't do it. These thrillers where there's mutilated bodies and body part. Like it's called The Chestnut Man. It was by the person that did the killing. Oh right. Man, I got into episode 3 and I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. That was the Basement reference. If anyone was interested, go watch The Chestnut Man. It's awful. I mean, it's amazing and well written. But I'm getting a bit queasy about it. It's like, when you were a kid, you could go on roller coasters and that Wurlitzer thing. Do you remember the Wurlitzer? The horrible, Wurlitzer. Awful. And they come push you and you scream louder. I remember going on with the kids when I was in my 30s and I came off and I vomited everywhere. I couldn't take it. And I'm like, God, you're getting on when you can't handle a funfair ride. But it's almost, I'm getting that way with TV shows. What's happening to me, Mark? What is happening? I used to watch like all the goriest horror and I just can't do it anymore. So funny.
Claire's gone the same actually. She can't watch the blood.
Do you know what I like? Do you know what I don't mind? I was having this debate. I was saying I don't mind zombies like ripping flesh out of people because they're not real. Maybe they are, but I don't mind that. But it's when you see a modern day thriller with a mutilated body hanging upside down with body parts cut. I'm like, yeah, but that could actually happen. That probably has happened, and that's awful. And I just like,
how did we get onto this?
I don't know. That's the problem. It's suddenly become a therapy session for we were talking about mental health. And I think that was the tenuous link. So let's get back. But yeah, folks, if you're getting rejected from stuff, celebrate
someone.
No, don't.
Oh, no,
don't
no,
do.
sorry.
Write about it. Write about it in your next book.
Yes,
and, take whoever rejected you and put them as a character in your book. And do whatever you want to them, and then
change their name.
Then and then you'll feel great. See, this is such
I've
a
done that a couple of
bizarre-
times. I have done that a couple of times.
This is
myself.
such a sorry. When I stand
very
back from all this
cathartic.
occasionally, Mark, we shout and do this every week, and we're kind of like we're doing this for like 7 years. But there's occasions when I stand back from this and think, "This is the weirdest thing." Like, we're talking to people that write about murdering people, and
great.
oh my god, it's so strange. It's like one of it is. It's a Twilight Zone moment, but I love it, and that's what makes it so fascinating. But anyway, let's move on to weddings, because weddings are fun. But my goodness me, are weddings expensive in Southeast Asia? What? 2,000 guests?
2,000, yeah,
like,
man.
I don't like. Has anyone ever funded a 100 guest wedding anywhere? It's ridiculous. Like, it's so expensive. 2,000, and I know in some. Like in India, they do like multiple days.
Yeah, it goes on for days. Yeah, friend at work.
And multiple outfits. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
but
I'm trying to. I mean, I've done all I can to put my kids off getting married as an institution, because then I'm going to end up paying for it. Run off to Gretna Green, kids.
yeah, the drive-through chapel at Las Vegas.
Exactly.
About that? Brilliant. Only in America. But weddings and real estate now. Very important to, like you mentioned in the interview, very important, because there are amazing characters in and situations in all of those opportunities.
It's real life.
It's real life. But it got us thinking, didn't it? Like, there's many people who want to be full-time authors listening to this podcast, and they might be stuck in a job that maybe they can't stand, or they feel it's not taking them anywhere, or it's preventing them from living their dream.
Yeah.
But we have a message for you today, folks. We have a message for you in that just imagine that you are simply an author doing undercover research.
Exactly.
That's what you have to do.
Deep cover.
Deep cover.
Yeah.
Like literally, like go down like a detective, find those characters, chat with them, stand back, observe, watch what's going on. Rather than get involved in the politics, just laugh at it, marvel at it. And there's so much material there. And what's great is Jessie has like taken all of these amazingly broad experiences that she's had, weddings, real estate, and it's made her career richer. Like, it's made her books richer, because she's drawing not just from her aunties, obviously, but from all of these different people that she's experienced. So I think it's a rich tapestry, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a little industry of mugs and T-shirts that say, "Be nice to me, I'm an author, I'll put you in my book," kind of thing. And I've always operated on that basis, in that if you ever engage with me, there is a chance you'll end up as a character in a book. And of course, most people don't recognize themselves either as their character, because they're not necessarily that self-aware. And always change the names, folks. But yeah, it's, I was lucky enough to work in publishing, but I've had crappy jobs before. And my job in publishing, I started in sales. It was great. I would go around and sell to people and enthuse about books. But the last couple of years, I was basically filling out spreadsheets all day, which is, it's the worst. So I was not happy those last couple of years. So it was kind of, the shining light in my day was when I was writing on my commute. That was the fun. And of course, publishing, you encounter all sorts of people. So yeah, it's all grist to the mill, essentially. It's all, keep a little notebook, write things down, make little notes. It's all fuel for story in the end.
And wasn't it interesting that when Jessie wrote about her aunties, thinking they were very, typical of her cultural background,
Yes. Yeah.
that she ended up getting all of these letters from all of these different
Nigerian aunties, Jewish aunties, Greek aunties. Yeah.
Amazing.
We've said this a few times now, which is the thing that you think is specific, the thing that you think is weird about yourself, the thing you think is peculiar that no one else will get, that you put in your writing, that you might be tempted to take out. That could be the very thing that is universal and speaks to so many people. And I think one of the reasons we might feel tempted to take those things out is we think they might reveal a bit too much about ourselves. They might be a bit exposing. But you know what? That's what readers love. They love those extremes. They love those things that are if you're a bit scared to write it, then that's probably a reason to put it in. And if you're in your first draft, definitely put it in, because you can always take it out later. You can give it to a beta reader and they can go, that was a bit weird, and then you can take it out. But I guarantee, actually, the thing is, the beta reader will go, that bit in particular, I loved. Let's have more of that, please. I guarantee it.
Well, what's fascinating is we often think about this cultural layer, which is, what we experience within our culture. And when we go to, say, like I went to India traveling once, and oh my gosh, culture shock. It was a different world. And I just couldn't, take in the senses. Just, it was an overwhelm. But then you kind of realize that underneath the cultural layer is the human nature layer. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're, even if you go back to prehistoric man, in prehistoric times, cultural layers color what we experience on the human layer. But the human layer is behavioral. It's what we're all part of. It's the shared DNA that we all have with the chimpanzees, and that's what's common ultimately. That's what ties us together as a human race.
It's the thingy triangle of needs, whatever it's called.
Yeah, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Which,
thank you. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There are universal needs that we have, but we, so when you're thinking about your writing, maybe don't overthink it. Go on those instincts. Go for those needs, because so many of those things are so universal. But I love the specifics. I love the specificity of it, because these things travel. We've all got nosy aunties, to a degree. And I love it.
Do you know, just on that word universal, my mentor Wayne Dyer once said, and it always stuck with me, he said, when you think about the word universal, it comes from the word universe. And universe actually means one song. Isn't that brilliant? Universe, one song.
Thought for the day.
Thought for the day, folks. Dwell on that one for a little bit. So the other thing we wanted to talk about was, I had to laugh when it came up, The Last Airbender. Okay. For people who've not, how would you describe, for people who don't even know what The Last Airbender is, how would you describe this show, Mark, to people?
I've never actually seen it. I know my kids have seen it. I know I probably lost some Greek geek credentials there. Not Greek, I don't have any Greek credentials. But it's about, isn't the different tribes? There's like a water tribe and a fire tribe. And
We've got the DVD set.
So you're well versed in it, so I'm not.
This is crazy. Okay, so picture the scene. All the kids got into The Last Airbender. Right. And what these, how to describe it, but it's what they have, these different powers. One can bend water, one can bend fire. It basically means they can control it, air, fire, and all the elements. Okay, so picture this scene. Every single weekend when my kids were like a certain age, probably up to about 14 at the high end, 5 at the low end, all three of them, they would be reenacting a scene or an episode of The Last Airbender.
Nice.
Not just in the garden, like where Kino, or in the bedroom, but on the trampoline. That was the stage.
Wicked.
And it was just the most bizarre, but they were like so into it, Mark. This is one of those shows. If you've got young kids, I really highly recommend it. It's really good. Like, it's a great show with like really good values. There's a lot of cool kind of mystic Eastern kind of Buddhism. There's a lot of that in there as well, like Zen. And it's just good lessons. And if you've got kids and you want to get them off, say, I'm not against like screaming Minecrafters on YouTube. I love them. I love it in particular. When my daughter doesn't wear headphones. And okay, old man, I don't get that, Mark. I don't get the screaming YouTubers playing video games. It just does my head in. It does my head in like Power Rangers did my head in about 10 years ago. I'm like, what is this? Sorry, I have to say it. But Last Airbender, that is good quality TV, and there's a lot of great life lessons in there. And you might even get to enjoy watching your kids jumping on a trampoline, bending air and bending fire. And they just disappear into this world. It is just brilliant. I mean, the imagination's fantastic. Sorry. But World of Warcraft, we should talk about World of Warcraft as well. The idea of where you can draw inspiration from. Jessie is writing a book about her aunties, and yet she's watched things like Last Airbender. She's played games like World of Warcraft, and in some way that's all influencing this world that she's creating, isn't it?
And Terry Pratchett as well. She's a fan of Terry Pratchett.
Like, interesting mix.
Yeah, it's fascinating mix. But this is the thing. You take you draw on different influences, and this is what makes us all unique. You might think that, oh gosh, I'm this is why people shouldn't get hung up on ideas. When you say, okay, I want to write a murder mystery about a little old lady who solves mysteries. Oh gosh, Agatha Christie already did that. Yeah, so did a million other authors, but they are bringing themselves to the book. They're bringing their unique influences and the things that make them unique. And that's what we love as readers. So just don't get hung up on the idea. Focus on the specifics. Focus on your voice, on the thing that makes you unique.
Yeah. And it is all those things that you have experienced, whether it's, things
Absolutely.
you've read, TV shows. That's what makes you completely unique. And that means you can write a book that maybe other people have written similar kind of books, but it won't be the same as the book that you're writing today.
Exactly.
Because it's your voice. And that's it. There's like your fingerprint. Brilliant, folks. Listen, if you want to join us for more mania in the extended edition, we are going to talk about the importance of emotionally moving on when you sent out your manuscript. Very important. We've also talked about looking forward to writing scenes instead of dreading them. That's a big topic right there. We're also going to delve into the mysteries of publishing and the way that amount of marketing is directly related to the size of the advance. I'm going to ask Mark about that because he knows all about this kind of stuff. And then Mark's going to give us an extended deep dive on world building. So folks, you can't miss it, surely. So pop along to Patreon, pop in your $10 or whatever it is to fund and help run this podcast, and you will get access to the extended plus all the others that we've done. So go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support, and we'll see you on the other side. Mr. Stay, welcome. And to everyone, welcome to the extended. And I just want to say, why did they ever put a slash in a URL? Like, that was the most ridiculous idea ever. Like, they could have done a dot. They could, like, slash.
It's coding, isn't it? Isn't it coding?
Yeah, but I sounded like I was half drunk when I said the word slash just before.
I'm saying weird. Nothing. You sure that's water in your flask there?
It's only 9 a.m. over here in Canada right now. But listen, folks, thanks so much for supporting this podcast. We're going to dive into the extended now. And we want to talk about the emotionally moving on when sending out a manuscript. This is something that Jesse mentioned in the interview, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. It's hard to do though, Mr. Stay, isn't it? What do you do when you've pop that manuscript off to the editor or the publisher?
Yeah, it's great advice. You just have to forget about it. And it's so weird because, especially if you're writing something, if you're listening to this and it's the first time you're writing something, you'll be so emotionally invested in getting that first draft done, and then editing, and then getting a second draft, and maybe more. And you might have spent years writing this thing, and your heart and soul has gone into it, and out it goes, and you just have to forget about it and get right on with the next thing. And it sounds crazy, but if you don't, you'll go mad. It will drive you nuts, because this is when it's out of your control. They say the way to overcome anxiety is to stop thinking about things you can't control, like earthquakes on the other side of the world and terrible disasters or whatever. I can't control those. What I can control is the fact that, all right, my manuscript is out there and someone might be sneering at it now or tossing it or just deleting the email. I can't control that, but I can get on with the next thing. I can do the next thing and make that as good as it can be. And then one day I might get a reply. And, oh, great. Okay, lovely. Someone's shown some interest. Brilliant. I'm back in control again, in a way. We're having a conversation about how it can be better.
If you imagine all of the worry, anxiety that we stack up, imagine we were filling a bucket full of that worry and anxiety, thinking about, is it going to be rejected? Did I do a good enough job? Should I have written that? Blah, 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 and all that stuff that goes on in our heads once we've let go of something. Well, not let go of it, but sent it off. I mean, letting go would actually be forgetting about it and moving on. But imagine filling that bucket full of all that stuff that we know for 2-3 months as we're waiting to hear back. What if we were to take the opposite approach and we would say, over here, actually, I'm going to expect the best. I'm going to expect that someone's going to read it, they're going to love it, and they're going to give me an offer. Now, some people might say that's setting yourself up for a failure, but think about the bucket of worry on over here that you've spent 3 months worrying versus the potential disappointment of having to deal with it not being accepted. I think it's a much smaller thing to deal with in the moment if it gets rejected versus the pile of worry, which affects every single day of your life and affects your mood and affects people around you, and actually probably doesn't help you write as well when you carry on writing your next book because you're worried about whether you're going to get rejected or not. It's like, fill yourself with what you'd love to happen because it costs nothing to do that versus, you know, the worry, the mental health struggles.
This sounds like the two wolves thing, isn't it? There are two wolves inside of you, and they're always fighting. One is darkness and despair, the other is light and hope. Which wolf wins? And it's whichever one you feed. That's the you know,
very good.
The
I love that. I always talk about in the life coaching for writers in the academy. I always talk about this analogy of what gym are you working out on? What machine are you working out on in the gym? It's like if you're working out on the warrior machine, you're going to get massive muscles building those, and you get good at worrying. You get really good. You become a professional warrior. You're an expert warrior. It's people don't realize the more we do of something, the better we get at it. So there are all these people, like everyone in the world seems to be like professional anxiety creators, professional warriors,
especially on social media.
Exactly, and that's a wolf. I will say in the wrong. When you get on the wrong types of discussions, that is a wolf that feeds that.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, so why don't we work out in the gym which expects the best of our work? And I know on some cosmic level, Mark, I do believe that when you put that kind of energy out into the world, it somehow, I like to think that it somehow influences the decision. Because when you like, think about Jessie, when she writes, she's literally infusing her energy into her words. It comes off the page. So when somebody's confident about their work, when someone wants the best for their work, that is infused in the words that you write, and it kind of comes off the page when that person at the publisher or the editor or the agent reads it. And that it's all transferring of energy. You know, it's what music is. When you create a piece of music, you're transferring the energy that you write in that moment to literal energy to the person, where they might even move around, dance, sing. It has an effect, and the same is true of words.
But just on a practical level, the fact that if you say, right, that's done, I'm on with the next thing, you are simply increasing the odds of success by producing another thing. And then after that, I mean, what she said, she wrote 8 books before her first book deal, and the deal was for the 5th book that she wrote.
Yeah.
You know, so she didn't wait. If she sat around waiting for book number 1 to get picked up, she'd still be waiting there now.
Exactly.
But she got to number 8. And at number 8, it was book number 5 that struck it lucky.
And now there's no stopping her. I mean,
exactly,
the momentum that Jessie's got now is absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
No question.
Now, one thing that jumped out for me as well was Jessie said she was so excited to write this scene about the dead body in her aunties. And it was weird because it struck me. It's like, wow, I don't often hear that from authors on the podcast. I don't often hear about this overwhelming joy and excitement that they can't wait to write a scene. What we usually hear, or we often hear, is, oh, I know, I've got this scene. It's going to be really hard. I don't quite know how to pull it off. I'm really dreading writing it. And I thought to myself, how much extra weight does that add to when we write? But flip it over, like, shouldn't we all be writing a story where, I mean, again, it's a utopistic view, but shouldn't we all be writing a story where every scene that we've come up with, maybe in our planning, we can't wait to write? I mean, that's got to be the ultimate book, right?
Yeah, this comes from the Ben Aronovich conversation. Do you remember he said, you know, I'm going to write something and it's going to be the best thing ever. That is, you know, the positive mental attitude you've got to go in with. Now, obviously, you're going to fall short of that perhaps, but if you go in with that attitude, again, the odds are more likely that it will be fun. So I do try to write a scene thinking, okay, how can this be more enjoyable and delight the reader? And a very common bit of feedback that I give to people in the academy when we have our surgeries and craft sessions, I will say to them, have fun with it. And I know it's a kind of almost feels like a flip thing to say, but if you are having fun with it, the reader will have fun with it. Now, that doesn't mean it needs to be jokey and light and humorous. It could be a really intense scene, an intense emotional scene. Have fun with it. You know, get in there and dig deep into those emotions and wring them for all they are. Or if it is a scene with body parts being chopped up, have fun with it. Do a thing with it that's never been done before. That, you know, so it's bring that energy to every scene. It can be exhausting. And so maybe that's why Jessie can only write in 15-minute spurts, because she's just going in there and she says it's pure writing, boom, having fun with it, and then going off and getting on with the day.
Yeah. And it's a way, I mean, Jessie's had to train herself to do this. Yeah. It's not something that she did, like if she was doing this from day one and she thought, oh, well, this is the way to write, she would have cracked this a lot earlier potentially. But we've got to also realize that we're all on this journey as authors to discover what works best for us and discover how we should show up, and also maybe to discover when we're not really feeling up for it. We still show up, we sit down with a blank page, and maybe we fake it. We fake our emotions. We pretend that we're looking forward to writing the scene, because anything like that will help us shift towards something which will definitely be a better output than if we just sat down and went, oh, I can't be doing this. It's just like, so this is the bit that I talk about in the Academy all the time on the life coaching side. This is so much of writing is mental. So much of it is attitude. So much of it is the self-talk. Because all of that stuff is the foundation to what you create ultimately. If you layer that with great storytelling, then that for me is the recipe for success. It's absolutely brilliant. And Jessie's such a great example of that.
Totally.
Now, Mark, Jessie talked a little bit about world building. I know that's something that you've had to do in spades, and obviously within the fantasy genre, it's almost a prerequisite for most people. But tell us a bit more about world building.
Yes, I mean it's when you think of world building, what first comes to mind? I mean, epic fantasy worlds like Tolkien and George R.R. Martin, or futuristic dystopias where society's broken down, or an allegorical world divided by warring civilizations. These stories lend themselves to detailed and complex world building, and that can be really intimidating. It's one of the things Jessie was talking about. She says, the world building, I'm going to write fantasy. The world building can be a bit off-putting. And I totally understand that. And we know people who've been in the academy who are kind of spent more time world building than anything else, So the big question is, do you really have to imagine an entire civilization before you even start chapter 1? Now, when your reader enters your world, they're going to need little signposts to guide them, little signals to show them how the world works. And when it's done well, this can enhance the world for your reader. Done badly, it's like sending them on a bus tour of an unfamiliar city with a boring guide droning over a faulty microphone. And there on your left is the Tower of Doom. You don't want that. You don't want that at all. So don't get carried away. World building can lead to extreme procrastination. Why bother writing something as tricky as a story when you've got to design the plumbing for a medieval fantasy city? No, unless you're writing a novel about a band of heroic fantasy plumbers, which isn't a bad idea, actually. We don't need to get into that sort of detail. Worse still, it's a distraction that can dupe you into thinking you're being productive. There's no point sketching out that plumbing system unless it's key to the story. So here's a big tip. The story must be served by the world, not the other way around. Tell your story and support it with wonderful nuggets of world building. So start with something simple like lunch, okay? Simple exercise to get you thinking about world building. Imagine your main characters are having a meal. Okay, think about the following. Where do they get the food from? Is it fresh from the hunt? Bought frozen at a supermarket? Eaten in pill form? How do they prepare the food? Is it on a spit, in a microwave? Is it eaten raw? How do they eat? As a family, sitting down, or are they on the move? How big are the portions? Are they meager scraps or a big feast? And what are the rituals? Do they give thanks to a deity? Do they wait till everyone is seated? Do their servants? Or do they just muck in? Now, if you answer these simple questions, you're already world building. You're telling the reader so much about the world of your story through a simple meal. And more importantly, you're world building through drama. This isn't just bald exposition. Your family could be having a dramatic scene at the meal, and you, the cunning author, can be slipping little bits of world building without the reader even knowing it. Okay, that's the important thing. Once they notice it, they can dial out. Feel free to steal from the real world because you, dear listener, already live in a complex and diverse world, and somebody has already figured out, say, perfectly good plumbing systems throughout history. If you really want plumbing to be at the heart of your story, and this is a good idea, then you will have to do some research. No, don't write a novel about cities plumbing. So a good writer and world builder has an inquiring mind. Read books, take notes. Knowing how the real world works will help when you create a make-believe one. Usually all it takes is a little twist to make the mundane fantastic. Now, you don't have to know everything. You already live in a world full of mysteries and unknowns. Make your world the same. Not only will it add a little level of inscrutability to your world, it will free you up as a writer from future constraints. Do you really need to know the name of every city on the map? Do you really need a complete family tree for your protagonist? Just give us the tip of the iceberg, but allow yourself the luxury of adding to it when it suits your story. But what you do need to know is the answer to why now? Why does your story start when it does? What is it about your world that's changing? Is a civilization about to collapse? World building will help you to elaborate why. Perhaps their crops are failing, the economy's in recession, or their terrible plumbing has led to a contagious disease. I take it back, plumbing can be important. World building can give context to the inciting incident of the story. And it's very important as well to allow for little wrinkles and dissent. Much of world building can be allegorical. An alien race in your science fiction novel could be based on a real culture in our world. But that doesn't mean you treat them as a monolithic whole. There isn't a single society in our world where everyone speaks with one voice or shares exactly the same worldview. Your alien race might be as peaceful and thoughtful as, say, Buddhists, but allow for voices of dissent among their ranks. Have wrinkles in society, ruling classes who despise the system that put them there, poor scavengers who don't want to join the revolution but would rather be eating with kings. We see these wrinkles in our world, put them in yours. But you say, what if I'm not writing fantasy or science fiction? Well, world building can apply as much to a contemporary thriller or romance as much as a far-flung fantasy or science fiction adventure. The world your characters live in needs to feel real. So the time and setting of your story will constrain what you do. So there's no cell phones in a Second World War thriller, unless, you're writing an alternative history where that happened. That's world building in action. So do your research by all means, but if it's a period or place that you're already familiar with, then leave research until the second draft. That way, you're only researching the relevant gaps in your knowledge rather than the subject as a whole. So that's just a taster of world building for you, dear listeners. We've got more in the Academy like that. We've got checklists and exercises and all sorts of fun stuff, but that'll get you started.
Brilliant stuff. Absolutely brilliant. And I think it's really important to, in any novel, there's a degree of world building, even if it's set in the modern day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely great. And actually that tip that you mentioned, Mark, about borrowing from the real world. I remember Shannon Mayer saying the reason that she writes urban fantasy is it means she doesn't have to go and recreate a brand new world, but she takes, as she says, the current world and she sprinkles a layer of magic over the top of it. Absolutely, I love that. Yeah. So kind of like, that's a good place to start if you don't want to go into the equivalent, which I've heard of my friend doing, is building like some new solar system, and he's got all the planets and he's shown me a map of it, and I'm like, how long have you been working on this? He went, 4 years. And I said, how much have you written in your book? Well, I'm still working on the outline. He's just world building. And he likes world building, but he's not actually writing. So yeah, really good tips. Absolutely brilliant. And good luck to everyone out there who is embarking on maybe a new novel where you're going to be inspired by what Mark's just said. And I want to build that world. Drop us a note and tell us how it goes. We'll be looking forward to hearing that. So thank you so much, folks, for listening to this extended edition. We hope you enjoyed it all.
We were going to talk about marketing.
Oh, we were, yes.
And
we haven't talked about the size of your advance. Yes, thank you very much, Mark. Yeah. So let's demystify some of this the black art of publishing. Jesse said that the amount of marketing is directly related to the size of an advance. And having worked in publishing for many, many years, Mark, you completely agreed with that, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't want to end the extended on a downer, but it is true. So I'm going to try and keep this as positive as possible. I just think if you do get a small advance, you're not going to be getting the book tour. You're not going to be getting, the VIP treatment. So if you go into that with your eyes open, you're less likely to be disappointed. So you might, you're going to have to do what I do, which is, put yourself up panels
you
and
plan
festivals.
totally. You have to kind of take that on proactively in many ways.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I had an honest conversation with my editor who said, yeah, we're only spending money on the big brands now, and I'm not one of the big brands. And it is because if a publisher is spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on an advance that they have to earn back, then that's where all their energy and focus is going to be. It's just simple business economics, you know. And I think if you go into publishing thinking, okay, my advance is, and let's define what a big advance is. I was talking to someone at FantasyCon who got 15 grand for a 3-book deal.
Was that pounds?
Yeah, £15,000.
So that'd be about that for our folks in, say, North America. That'd be about 22,000 roughly US.
Yeah, so that's £5,000 per book, and that gets broken into 3. You get a third of that in advance, a third of that on delivery, and a third of that on publication. So you break that into 3. So that's again tiny amounts. These are not life changing amounts of money. Then less tax, less agent's commission, all that stuff as well. So that publisher has got you on their books, but they've not spent a lot of money on you. They're more likely to earn that back just organically at some point. So, you know, you are not going to. Whereas if they've spent £300,000, £500,000, $1 million or more, then they've really got to work to make that back. So that is where they're going to be spending money on big advertising campaigns. Now, people listening to this will be going, well, that's crazy. That's not fair. Yes, I know, but that's late stage capitalism for you. That's just the way the world is. There's not a lot we're going to do about that. And I don't fancy communism. That doesn't work either. So,
but do you know what's interesting though, Mark, is that when you think about the advance, I never really thought about it like this, but when you think about the advance that an author gets from the publisher's perspective, that's only part of the budget. So you've got to think, like, if you are getting an advance of, say, 100,000, which would be nice, they're in their spreadsheet, they've got the 100,000 for the author, and then they're probably, I mean, do you know what the ratio is typically? Like, would it be another 100,000 marketing or 50,000 marketing, or, I mean,
if only publishing was that scientific. It's usually based on panic and chaos, where you know, you have a sales conference earlier in the year, and everyone goes onto the sales conference and they say, we bought this book by this author and it's going to be our super lead title, and we spent a ton of money on it, and you lot, they're pointing at sales and marketing and rights and publicity, you know, you lot have to sell a lot to earn that money back. We editors have made a crazy purchase and you lot have got to make it worse. Now, to be fair, that's what it was like when I started out. We go to sales conferences and we think, what the hell? Why have they bought this book? There's no chance this is ever going to sell. Why? Whereas now the acquisitions process, sales and marketing, publicity, they're all involved, which is why you hear people going, my editor, you know, I sent my book to a publisher. The editor loved it, but they couldn't convince sales and marketing to buy it, which sounds a bit depressing, but actually that means that wasn't the right publisher for you.
Yeah, it's probably better.
Dodged a bullet there.
You want all of the parts of the team on board to make it a success ultimately.
I mean, there is an argument: is that the tail wagging the dog? Is that sales and marketing lacking the imagination? But actually, in publishing, it's quite, everyone chips in. It's quite collegiate. You know, everyone is passionate about the books, and they do know the markets where they can sell certain kinds of books. It's not perfect by any means, but it does make a huge difference. So it's if you do get the big advance, you are more likely to get that VIP treatment where you get the big ad campaign and everything. But if you don't, just go in eyes open, saying, okay, I'm not going on a tour. I'm not getting, I mean, ads on the side of it. When you see National Railway advertising campaigns or ads on the side of buses, and that is
Tube. Yeah, that's top.
In Tube campaign. That's a lot of money.
Gold standard. Oh gosh. Yeah.
That is
like
by
one billboard in the underground, Mark. What would that cost a week? Thousands.
Well, it's thousands. It's a lot of money. And also it's the kind of money that I know publishers hate spending these days because it can't be measured. Because when you do Facebook ads and when you do Amazon ads, AMS ads, you can measure it. There's a cost per click.
All the way through to the purchase.
Exactly. Yeah. It's totally measurable. And you can say that worked. That was successful. Whereas the big billboard in a train station, you know, it's, to be honest, it's usually for the ego of the brand author. It's so that when they go to the crime, convention, they can go, oh, I had a big billboard at Waterloo Station.
Well, I saw on Twitter just the other day, I saw an author basically did a tour of all the London Underground and took a photo of themselves in front of every one of their billboards. And it is, I saw
that. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Which is great. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I think it's brilliant, but very, very rare these days, especially as online spend is also kind of halving budgets in the offline world in many ways. But
yeah, some of it is extreme. It's extreme author care as well. If they've got a big brand author, you can guarantee that big brand author is getting offers from other big publishers. If you are one of the top 3 crime authors at publisher A, publisher B, C, D, E, F are all saying, come to us, we'll give you an even bigger advance and we'll give you an even bigger advertising campaign than they're offering. So it's the pressure is on the publisher to retain those big name authors so that it can say, we have brand X that everyone's really excited about. Yeah. So, you see this all the time. And those big brand authors do have big brand egos to go with them as well. And they can, it gets fed. So it's on a whole other level. And unless you're wrapped up in that kind of thing, then don't worry about it, man. Just keep writing books.
Yeah. Well, and also build towards that. If you get most authors don't get a massive advance as their first ever advance. They get something small, maybe. It gives you, a leg up, and you think, wow, this is for real. This is really happening. And you feel like a proper author then. But that's stage one, and go for it. Do your own book tour. Push your book as much as you can, because if you make it successful, then next time you're going to get a bigger advance and you're going to get a bit more marketing, and that's how it works. Eventually you might get that billboard in the underground, but. Yeah, it's a fascinating world, isn't it, Mark? And I love the fact that you've experienced it from behind the scenes, because, from where I've always sat on the outside, you don't really know what goes on behind the closed doors. You don't really understand the psychology behind a lot of stuff.
I could tell you some stories,
you could write a book on it, couldn't you?
I could, but I'd be taken to court by big name authors with big name lawyers.
Oh, brilliant. But that'd be great publicity for the book, wouldn't it, Mark? Free front page on the Sun. Can't beat that as a publicity campaign. Just saying. No, I jest. But listen, folks, I really hope you found this useful. We are very, very appreciative of you guys being there with us every minute of the podcast. I know that you're out there. I know there are people that listen to every single week, everything we do, which is absolutely brilliant. Makes our week as well, hearing your stories. So do spread the word, folks. Remember, every month is Recommend the Bestseller Experiment Podcast Month now. It's official. Brilliant. We'll see you next week. So, Mr. Stay, lots going on wins and social media this week.
Really lots to discuss, and I don't want to rush these, but there is a lot to get through. Let's start with Andrea van der Bruggen in the Academy. She says, I finally have a win. I finished my first draft. It's a month to the day late per my dream declaration, but considering how arbitrary that date was, I really don't mind. I originally got the idea something like 2 years ago and worked on it here, the Academy, and there, but never got any momentum. I joined the Academy for the push to get it done, started writing my 200-ish words every day around February 1st, and kept at it come teething toddlers or international flights. Now, Andrea spent a lot of the summer touring the UK with her family. It was amazing watching, and she was logging those words every day. It's amazing. She says it's a big sloppy mess. She's talking about her first draft there, not the UK or her family. It's a big sloppy mess. It's not even entirely in sequential order, but I made it through the final conflict scene, and now it's time to go back and turn it into something like an entertaining novel. They say writing a novel is a marathon, but I suggest it's more of a triathlon. 3 arduous phases instead of 1. I'm finally out of the water. Now onto my bike. Brilliant. Congrats,
I love
Andrea.
that analogy. I so love that story. That last Friday, I put out a weekly newsletter to all the Academy members in the Bestseller Academy, and that story was the Academy story of the week. And just kind of referencing Andrea's tour, I remember her showing up to one of our life coaching sessions, and she was in a hotel hotel room. She even showed up to the coaching on holiday. I was like, wow, it's amazing. And I'm so chuffed for Andrea, because she's firstly, she's an amazing writer, but she's also one of the loveliest Academy members you'll meet. She's brilliant. So congratulations, Andrea. We're so chuffed for you.
Great news from another Academate, Jodie Parker. An early win, she says, I've published the ebook version of my book, The Epsilon Account, on this just the Sunday just gone. She says the print version is still in the works, but I've ordered the proof copy. So I'll put a link in that. That's The Epsilon Account of book 1 of The Golden Harvest by Joni Parker. Check that out. Congratulations, Joni.
Brilliant, Joni.
Not been with us long already. I think one of our, really great members of the Academy. She's brings a lot of experience to the Academy as well. So it's great to have you with us, Joni. Fantastic news. A great bit of news from Katie Wells as well on the Academy. She says, ever since I realised it existed, I wanted to be able to donate a book to the Child in Read auction. And this year I could. It's odd to see my novel next to big names, and it will never make huge donations, but it's nice to feel I'm able to do something little. So yeah, this is Child in Read is an auction where you can donate things. And, the auction, all the money goes towards this brilliant charity. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check that out. But Katie, that is fantastic. So not only are people reading your book and enjoying it, but you're putting a bit of good into the world as well. So congrats on that, Katie.
Wonderful story.
Brilliant stuff. And from one wonderful story to Karen's story in the Academy as well. She says, I'm calling this a newsletter win. She says, thanks to the encouragement from this Academy, I finally set up my very first author website last spring. But one thing I've still been dragging my feet on is starting that all-important email list and newsletter. I mean, come on, who wants to read my boring meanderings? Anyway, she says, I listened to the recording of Writer's Surgery that I did a couple of weeks ago, because Anne Woodward in the Academy was asking about newsletters, and I said, start it now. So Karen started it. I think Anne's starting it soon. She says, I was inspired by all the talk of pets during the surgery, was saying, yeah, people love pets. Anyone who's seen me on an Academy Zoom has seen my Persian cat Tiffany crashing the calls. I have. I've decided she is writing my monthly newsletter, which will go out on the first Sunday morning of every month. I'm calling it Breakfast with Tiffany, and it's brilliant. I've subscribed to it. I've already had a newsletter. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to get a newsletter from a Persian cat called Tiffany every month. Who doesn't?
Who wouldn't want that in their inbox? Brilliant,
Karen. And a couple of amazing wins from BXP team members. Now, I mentioned I was at FantasyCon. Well, the British Fantasy Society has an awards ceremony every year at FantasyCon, and we've got 2 BXP members who are winners, not least Queeve McDonald. Stranger Times won the British Fantasy Award for audio. He says, I've never won anything before, so massive thanks to everyone who helped out with his podcast and narrated stories. He says, I reckon about 20 comedians all just became the first British Fantasy Award winners. So congrats to Queeve on that. Fantastic. And also Rowan Coleman, who's in the group, she wrote a short story which was in the anthology, which won the winner of the British Fantasy Award for Best Anthology. It's a thing called Someone in Time, and Rowan had a story in that. So we've got 2 winners in the BXP team there as well. So congrats to Rowan, congrats to Queeve. Just fantastic.
Brilliant. Well done, both of you. And many, many more to come, no doubt, as well, I think.
Yeah, you betcha.
God, blimey, there's a lot of wins this week. How do we keep up with all this? Do you know what's going to happen, Mark? We're going to have to do another podcast of just wins. Hour-long podcast of just wins. Well, listen, folks, we hope... We have a lot of people tell us, actually, it's really cool. We got a lot of feedback about our kind of win section. They love it. They say it feels like kind of local community news in the author world. But it's absolutely brilliant. And we want you to be a part of that. So if you have a win to celebrate and share with us, then just drop us a note. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com and hit on the contact button. And whilst you're there, folks, don't forget, we have a mailing list. It's not written by a Persian cat, I will say, but hopefully it's just, I know, but maybe we'll have to go down that pet theme. My daughter has convinced me, Mark, you ready for this? To get a new pet. Do you know what she's going to get? A hedgehog.
Oh, brilliant.
How brilliant is that? Hedgehogs are one of my favourite pets, characters from when I used to live in Surrey in England.
We had one in our garden.
Yeah, we don't get them here. I've never seen a hedgehog in Canada. I don't know if they... I did see a bear, though. I saw a bear and its mum last night on top of my bloody fence, wrecking our grapes. And I woke up this morning and I found half a pear tree. Oh. And I looked at the pears yesterday going, they look absolutely perfect. I'll pick those tomorrow. I'm not kidding you. Half a bloody pear tree. The
Yogi
bear,
beat you to it, yeah.
Yogi beat me to it. I cut in our garden. It's just brilliant. I mean, I'm not complaining. Like, you know, I'm glad that we have these incredible.
The bears were there
creatures,
first, to be fair.
They were there first. We decided to put a pear tree there. It was our fault. But no, hedgehogs. We're going to get hedgehogs. So maybe no. The bestseller experiment newsletter won't be written by a hedgehog, but. Yeah, we maybe have to think of some exotic animal, but it's a great newsletter. It tells you about what's coming up, who we've interviewed, what we've learned, and what you're going to learn, and direct links to where you can find all of the different places where the podcast goes out. So do pop along to that. And Mark, where can people find us on socials?
Social media, we are on Facebook as Bestseller Experiment. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads as @BestsellerXP. So come and find us there. If you've been inspired by Jesse or any of our guests, do give us a rating. It really, really helps make us visible, or a little review wherever you get your podcasts. And do please subscribe. That also makes a big difference too. Thank you as always to our editors, Dave and JD.
Of course. And if you're inspired by Jesse and a 15 minutes habit a day, hey, we got something called the 200 word challenge that does exactly that. So pop along to 200wordchallenge.com and sign up. Get inspired. Can you write for 7 days in a row, 200 words a day? It's harder than you think, but once you get past those 7 days, hold on to your breeches, because you know what? You could be writing for the rest of your life every day. And that's a ton of books, as well we know from Jesse.
We do, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, folks, it's great having you with us for the ride. We'll see you next week. It's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And goodbye from Mark 2. Bye.
Goodbye.